Now, to understand methods, we would need to simply understand um, that the number of lines of code that you write isn't a metric of how good your code is. So a better code would do the job in a lower number of lines, or a lower line count, and it would be more efficient and more understandable. There's a dozen things to consider other than the number of lines that you basically produce. So functions allow us to write something once and keep using it over and over again without having to repeat the steps. So for example, let's say we have a double called r, and let's assume that this r is the radius of a circle. Now we want to calculate the area of the circle, and I'm not sure, but I believe that the formula is pi r square, which is math.pi times r times r and so on. Now if we forgot to call this something, so let's call it a. Let's run it. It would be fine. Let's just do system.out.println. R is R and A is A. Okay, now we can see here the results, but if we wanted to calculate the area one more time, we would have to copy the same lines, change the value to something else, change the variable names, run the code once again, and we would have the result for the second circle. One, and just like that we would have the result of the second circle. And as you can see, I forgot to change this. Sometimes other things happen in a more complicated code. So that's the reason why we use functions, to avoid doing such things. So let's see, or let's start by explaining the format of functions, or the syntax that we follow to make functions. First we do public static type name inputs So public static, the return data type, the name of the function, the inputs that the function would take. Then in the body of the function you run the code that you want to apply on the inputs, and finally you return the output, or you print it out to the user. Now public static and return type are each an interesting topic to cover by itself, but for now we will only say that in the main class, when you're making a method within the main class, the class that has the main method, you would have to make it public, static, and the rest depends on your needs. So let's make a function that calculates the area and returns a double. We would call it calculate area. The input would be a double. Let's call it rad. And let's make a double, call it area, and make it equal to math.py times whatever the user decides to give us, times itself. Or a better way to do it is using math.pow rad to the second power From there we would be done with the calculation itself. Then we would do return area. Whatever we write here is simply a promise to the user or to the Java IDE that in the function somewhere I will give you a value of this type or a variable of this type that you can take back and send to whoever tried to use this function. So basically we created a double here, then we calculated the value that we needed to calculate, then we returned it simply, or we basically sent it back. So instead of doing this here, I would simply do calc area of R, and it will use this stuff to calculate the area using this radius. So simply the return would bring back the area value into the variable called A and would store it here. So when we run the code, note the current value. Let's run the code and see if there are any changes. No changes, but it looks quite a bit better. And we can even do this directly. Let's say 3.3, and let's do calc area 3.3. Now the upside of this is that we can do it multiple times. Without having to repeat the calculation each time. We just call the function and ask it to take this as our input and give us back our output. Another way to do it is to replace this return type with a void. So yeah, we replaced the double here with a void and replaced the return with a print statement. From there we can just delete these, and we can say here for rad equal rad, which is the input, the area is area. And we wouldn't even need to perform a print. So let's do directly calc area 1.5 2.5 3 4 5 15 and as you can see, much simpler, much cleaner, and all of that was done using a single two-line function. And the more you get used to writing functions, the easier it becomes to adapt to more complex problems and to figure out simpler solutions to your projects and your problems. Anyway, that was it for the introductory Java series.